Everyone tells you eat intuitively, listen to your body, trust yourself, and that all sounds great until you realize that you spent an entire decade not even knowing what foods have protein in them or what a protein actually is. My opinion is you cannot be intuitive about a language that you've never learned. Like if you don't know food, there is no intuitiveness behind it. Today, we're actually going to give you our 3M nutrition framework and break down exactly what that is, starting with meal plans, macros, and then mindset. I am your host, Ryan. This is my wife, Maddie. And without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, so to start us off here, most women are skipping straight to step 3 or step 2, in my opinion. And that's why it's not working, or they're stuck wondering why it's not working. They reach out to us and say, I'm burnt out on macros, or I try to mindfully eat, but I regress. The only thing I can do is basically feel like I have to live in MyFitnessPal. And that's what I want to try and unpack and uncover in this episode. I don't think intuitive eating is the problem. I don't think that it's bad, but I think the sequencing of it, if you don't actually know how to be intuitive and make those decisions, is quite literally exactly where people go wrong and why they stay stuck for so long.
I would agree. Even if people do start with macros, learn macros, they still don't ever learn the exact framework of, how mindful or intuitive eating even works. I struggled with that a lot myself. Like, I used to see these girls that just intuitively eat, listen to your body, stop eating when you're full. And I didn't know what any of that meant, or I didn't even know how to build meals that made me feel full and satiated either. I definitely have learned through coaching hundreds of women now that there is a sequence to this. There is a process. 3M method is what we put everyone through.
Love it. Maddie, why don't you tell me a little bit about getting into talking point number 1 here, meal plans, removing the decision. Why do we start people off with a meal plan?
We start people with meal plans because it's just so much easier to build that structure for people initially. And it's actually one of the number one things I hear probably the best feedback on in our coaching is, oh my gosh, no one's ever shown me how to eat or what to eat. Like I've maybe seen macros before, or I've tried Instagram recipes or something. But our biggest goal with giving a meal plan isn't something for you to be married to forever. It's to build that structure, kind of remove the daily, like, well, what do I eat? How do I get in this protein goal? And it removes the negotiation because for most females that we work with, there's so much decision fatigue that's killing the consistency. Or for many of us, you get home from work, it's late in the afternoon, you've had a long day, you had to pick up the kids, and you're sitting in the kitchen and you're like, well, what the heck do I eat tonight? And in terms of a meal plan, I think you can attest to this as well. It's so much easier to just have a plan. Essentially, we call it like the training wheels, and
Hmm?
it allows you to have direction initially with a meal plan. But we don't want people to be married to this forever. But it is, I think, one of the strongest pieces of the foundation to eventually move on to step 2 and step 3.
Yeah. I think you said something earlier today when we were talking to our clients on our call was a meal plan isn't a cage. And I don't know, I just really like that because I think a lot of people hear the term meal plan and they're like, I don't want to do that. It seems too rigid. And like they're afraid of that structure, but fearing that structure is exactly why, in my opinion, people stay stuck because they've never had it before. And so they're afraid to have it. They're afraid to plan food for a week and maybe not like a meal or maybe not like something or feel like, I'm gonna have to eat the same thing more than once. And, my rebuttal to that is, well, when you're eating off plan, you usually eat the same shit anyways. When you go out to drink, you usually have a favorite drink and you drink it over and over and over again. Very rarely do you find someone that gets a different drink every time they go out or gets a different food every single time they go out. They go out to the same things that keep them, or excuse me, they go out and get the same things and order the same foods and drinks that keep them off track in the first place. They have the same snacks in their cupboard that keep them off track in the first place. They're not buying something on every different shelf level of the aisle for a snack and bringing it home every single week. Like if somebody likes nacho cheese Doritos, they eat fucking nacho cheese Doritos, in my opinion. It's a little bit blunt, but I mean, that's just
That's
where,
what it is.
yeah.
And it's true. I think like you said, there is a little bit of fear around meal plans, especially if you've ever followed any type of diet before or a random meal plan you found on the internet. There is definitely like that rigid feeling of like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. Like, and then it then brings us into the problem of like, okay, well, what do you do when you go to an event or you go to a party or you're at a work event or you're at a work lunch dinner with your husband date night? Then what do you do? And that's kind of where macros come into play because we don't want you to be married to a meal plan
Hmm.
forever. We want you to learn the structure so that as we get into macros, we can dive into that more and what that looks like.
Yeah. And I'll just speak to that point too. A meal plan is Also, the very first reason, or I think one of the most important reasons, when someone comes into our coaching, they're in pain, they want to lose weight, they want to get moving their body. The last thing they need to be thinking about is all of these decisions or trying to figure out macros immediately. We don't give people cookie cutter meal plans. That's one of the most positive feedbacks we've ever gotten from clients. And I know we brought up the new meal plan builder that I made on our call tonight. And it was awesome. It's so cool because we can tailor it very specifically. They are custom made meal plans, right? We tailor it very specifically to foods that they already know, like, and enjoy. Um, People have like very specific brands of things they want to buy. And so I think having things that you actually like to eat, but it's also made in the quantities that your body is going to need. You're hitting your proteins, your fats, your carbs, and most importantly, in my opinion, your fiber. People are starting to have regular bowel movements. People are starting to feel better. People are starting to, there's the feeling of accomplishment of like, wow, I did this and I saw the scale move, or I did this and my workouts feel better. I did this and my sleep's better because I'm not cramming in all this food late in the evening and trying to digest food with an elevated heart rate throughout the night. And so they have that immediate structure and they can start moving forward basically from week one on until we do get them in macros, which leads me perfectly into talking point number two, macros. I put macros here, learning the language, if you will. Speak on that a little bit. What is the main purpose why we transition people from a meal plan to macros? And how do you see those? I would say the vast majority of the fat loss phase, people are tracking their macros.
100%. I think tracking macros in general is just the easiest way for us to have accurate data and feedback and understanding of what's going into your body. But the biggest thing with the macros is yes, we start you with the meal plan. So you have structure to those macros. You see how to split out your meals so that you're not, when you're in a macro phase, chasing macros all day long, feeling like you're playing macro Tetris. We want macros to teach you what food actually does for you and how it makes you feel, not just how it tastes or not just how do I get in this much, the perfect amount of protein, fats, and carbs playing macro Tetris. That gets very overwhelming. It's where we see clients see burnout. And so we go from meal plan structure. It's like we take that same structure and we apply it to these macros where it's like, okay, once you learn how to make adjustments, then you can swap out meals and you're not married to this meal plan. And you learn how to move with the times. You learn how to go on a date night and you understand what the food is. You understand what a protein is. You understand what a fat is. And it just makes the journey so much easier as you move into macros. I think people who have maybe tracked macros before and have felt like it hasn't worked for them, it's typically because they're doing it without structure. So they feel like they're winging it all day. That's where decision fatigue kicks in. Of course, we see that often, but you can't adjust what you don't understand.
Yeah. I want to speak to that point. I can't remember exactly how you said it. You said people that feel like they've tried macros and macros don't work for them, or the example I love to give, burnt out Becky.
Hmm.
We don't coach anyone named Becky, by the way. That's why I can still use the name. We have to keep changing names, I feel like. Watch someone named Becky reach out to you next week. Now, when they say it hasn't worked or they feel burnt out, I think there is this common occurrence that people find themselves in. I'm guilty of it. You've been guilty of it. Our clients have been guilty of it. And they're like, God, I just feel like such a pain in the ass to track my macros. And I think it's because they start the day with a blank slate. I think it's because they are getting away from the structure that the meal plan initially provided of planning what you want to eat. What are the foods that I like and enjoy that I know, the recipes that I like to cook. And this starts in, the household. This starts with your family. If you have kids, especially, you've got to make sure that people are on board. Because if you're trying to do everything just for yourself and then everything for the whole rest of your family, it is extremely chaotic. Yeah. We don't have kids, but even me doing it for you or you doing it for me, when we have opposing goals, can be a lot. And so I think us being on the same page and having an actual planning day helps. So you go from planning to buying the food. Then you go from buying the food to prepping the food. You have to determine, are you going to cook that food for the entire 7 days? I know we've definitely done that before. And what we find what works best for us is typically a Saturday or Sunday prep. And that gets us about midweek. And then we bulk prep proteins again once more. And that gets us through Saturday. And then we do it again. And I think that is very helpful because you don't show up looking in MyFitnessPal and you've already eaten breakfast at this point, right? This is where people, when they hit the blank slate theory or the blank slate trap, is they're like, okay, this is what I had for breakfast. I didn't plan my lunch, and you know what? Oh shoot, we're actually eating out for lunch. And so they're playing this game of they've got a blank slate. They're trying to track as the day goes on. They forget about it. And then they get to dinner and they're like, oh, shoot, I'm out of what, insert protein here. I'm out of ground beef. I can't have that meal tonight because I didn't plan enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't prepare enough at the start of the week. And so that is why, in my opinion, people feel a bunch of friction when they're trying to track everything. It feels like a lot because they're living in there. They're
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to make it fit. They're trying to figure out tomorrow, but they still haven't figured out today. They started with a blank slate. That's why we always tell clients, hey, make sure you've got consistent square meals, that you're not snacking throughout the day and just tracking whatever and then screwing up the rest of your day. Because there's a ripple effect. It ripples through the entire day. It ripples through the entire week if you didn't plan or prep your food. So that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, it
It's
makes it tricky when you're winging it all day. And so that's why you have to go through each stage of these because you can't just wing it. You can't wing the meal plan situation. You can't meal plan the phase of macros because then you will absolutely try to wing it on mindful eating. And that's where we typically
mhm,
see people go backwards or they get stuck there and they have this, constant mindset of like, oh, I just want to be a person that doesn't have to track my food. I just want to be a person that can intuitively eat. But then all of a sudden the scale creeps up and you aren't sure what to do when you're not on MyFitnessPal.
mhm,
And so going through this process, but having the systems in place, like you were talking about standard portions and having your set meals that you eat. And it doesn't have to be the same thing all the time. Just like we talked about with the meal plan, it's like find the things that you enjoy and that you like and that are repeatable, but then also learning how within macros to also go out and enjoy life, go to social settings, know what that looks like without it turning into this all or nothing mentality of like, oh my gosh, I'm way off track. This isn't in my meal plan. I'm all screwed up now. What do I do? I'll start again tomorrow. And so I think it helps break the cycle when we can go through this step by step.
mhm. One thing I want to add there too, you mentioned standardizing portions. I want to give a shout out to Cody, my coach who helped me prep for my photo shoot, Cody McBroom. If you watch this, what's up, man? This is something that I learned from him that has helped so much. And I knew it and had applied it, but I didn't really actually live it and make it part of my system until I was prepping for a photo shoot. Because in 2019, when I got really lean and took a bunch of photos, like I didn't have a lot going on. I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I had more of a full-time job at that point, and it was less building a business. And so I had that structure. The food thing felt easy. I could sit there and play macro Tetris. And I was talking to Emily about this tonight. When you have motivation for something, it feels easy, and you're like, well, it's not that hard. And you have a family, or you got a job, or you're traveling. If you don't have that structure or those standardized portions, it makes it infinitely harder. And so, to give context, when I was dieting down, my calories were dropping not rapidly, but like they were getting lower than they'd ever been before. And it was pretty uncomfortable. And I was trying to decide. And some of the days I would have more rice, and some days I'd have less rice, and I had to have other meals, and I'd be eating like more salad. And I was just always adjusting portions. And he's like, man, you got to standardize your portions. You need to, like, your meals need to have 200 grams of this, and then you have this much rice. And then anytime you eat that meal, just eat that amount. You made a great example. When we cook breakfast, I usually have 3 eggs and you have 2 eggs. We don't randomly say, I'm going to have 9 eggs today, or I'm going to have 7, or I'm going to have 1.25 eggs. You just figure out, like, okay, what's a good size breakfast? For you, it's probably around like the 500-ish calorie mark with what you're eating now. For me, it's like 7 to 850 calories, depending on what foods. Standard portions, standardized portions. It makes everything easy when you do get into that mindful eating. You don't have to weigh everything, you don't have to track everything, but you've built the habit of standardized portions. You don't grab a spoonful of peanut butter over and over and over every time you pass the cupboard. You don't have 9 eggs instead of 2 or 3 or whatever.
Yeah, I want to hammer that point home even more because we talked about it on our client call tonight with all of our clients, standardizing your portions, or to a point you just made. For me, my breakfast is usually roughly the same calories, but to go further than that, if there's one thing you get from this today, when you know what your macros are and you know how many meals you're going to eat, if you can just divide your macros for the total day by how many meals you're going to have and try to aim for that many macros per meal, for me, that's usually somewhere between 25 to 30 grams of protein every single time I eat.
Mm-hmm,
That helps when you go to standardize your portions. Because you said, I'm not just going to randomly do 30 grams of rice on one meal and randomly do 75 grams of rice on a different meal. The whole point is to spread my macros out throughout the entire day, which
mm-hmm,
again brings us back to the beginning of a meal plan and why we structure it the
mm-hmm,
way that we do.
mm-hmm. The
so that you
structure's
won't.
still there. It never went away.
Exactly, so then you apply it with macros, and I think it's so important. We talked about this with clients tonight. It just that ability right there and understanding that correlation is really important. Or you get to this point where like, "Oh, I track macros, but I rely on it so much as the tool that I'm afraid to take it away." And then we see people take it away, or they end coaching, or they end their period of time that they were tracking macros for a fat loss goal, and suddenly 6 months down the road, we see the weight start to creep back up.
Mhm.
Portions get bigger, but, you know, paying attention to how they're building their plate. They start snacking a little bit more. Gets a little more willy-nilly when you're at an event or eating out. So standardizing those portions is incredibly important. And I think that's like the number one thing to be able to take from this entire thing
Oh, 100%.
that will make mindful eating
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
easier.
And for any guys watching this too, you probably need to eat more than 25 grams of protein per meal. For me, I eat 220 grams of protein. So for me, that looks like 55 grams of protein exactly. If I do 220 divided by 4, I need 55 grams of protein each meal. I think my breakfast has like 62. And I think my last meal of the day is a little bit lighter on protein. And the other two are right around like that 50-ish mark. So it's like 65, 50, 50. And if I do the math on that, it's 165. Yeah, it comes out to like 45 or 55 or something for the fourth meal.
Yeah.
Keeps it really simple. For you, it's 120 is your protein goal. 120 divided by 4, you need 30 grams of protein, roughly, give or take, at each meal. When you're mindful eating, that's super important to have in your back pocket because you're like, okay, how much protein do I need at this meal? Well, it definitely needs to be more than 12.
Yeah, I'm not just gonna do a random arbitrary number of
Yeah.
how much meat I'm gonna weigh out on my plate. It's gonna
One,
be standard because I know it'll
yeah,
get me to that goal.
100%. And also knowing the other thing too, and before we move into point 3 here is I eat 4 square meals a day. 95% of the time, I don't snack often. And when I do, that is typically when my body weight will start to creep back up, like after our wedding. We were eating out more. I was snacking more. We were buying more things like chips and more processed snacks that I was having. And you start grabbing handfuls of that stuff. And all of a sudden, you're eating 5, 6, 700 calories that you don't even remember or feel full from because you're just eating it throughout the day. Well, multiply, extrapolate that out through the week. You've now eaten an extra 2 to 5,000 calories. There's a pound right
Yeah.
there. So getting into talking point number 3, mindful eating. Now you can trust yourself. If you've applied pillar number 1, the meal plan, developing that structure, building those habits, and pillar number 2, the macros, and learning how to slowly swap things out and make good decisions. So I want you to speak on that a little bit. How does mindful eating work? How does it come into play? What is it actually in your definition?
Yeah. So one of our wonderful clients right now is actually going through the whole process of mindful eating. We ease people into this for sure. But my client, Sydney, is down 30 pounds. And not for everyone do we go through a fat loss phase and mindful eating at the same time. It really depends on where someone's at, how they feel mentally around food, how they're feeling with their choices, and ultimately their systems as well. Are they in a position where they do consistently grocery shop and consistently have things prepped? And how do they handle events and stuff that helps us move into mindful eating phases for people. But it's incredible to see her mindset shifts around food, knowing it's like when I say mindful eating, I don't say like, oh, we just rip your meal plan and MyFitnessPal away. That's not what we want. Yeah, it's like
Throw it in the trash.
we don't just overnight swap and be like, yep, never look at the numbers again. We ease into this step by step and that we create standards and boundaries around specifically your life. What makes sense to you? Habits maybe you want to break around food. We've talked about this in some aspects where it's really easy to like grab an extra handful of chocolate chips or an extra handful of cashews or take a bite while you're cooking food. It's like, okay, well then create a boundary where it's like tell yourself, I no longer want to be a person that snacks on my kids plates. Make that a boundary for yourself if that's a spot that you find yourself continuously overeating on.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how we help people work through the mindful eating phase, but it's never just like overnight snap your fingers, don't look anymore. Often people are still weighing their food or checking out themselves a couple days per week. Maybe we start with 1 day of mindful eating and then eventually we bump you up to 7 days where it's like, what does this look like for you? How do you feel? You keep weighing in. But then that way you're not just guessing, you truly have good intention around your food. And so when you've done steps 1 and 2, your gut feeling and like feeling confident in your food, you've actually earned that because this phase is 100% earned. This is not something you jump to. This is not something you wing. But now, then that way, like when you claim you're listening to your body, it actually has context. You know
Mhm.
what it feels like to feel full. You know what it feels like to have a balanced plate. You don't just grab snacks that are full carbs that find you wanting to snack more later.
Yeah.
And so mindful eating, I think, has a very wide definition and it's so different for every single client. But if you can go through this process and learn your systems and your routines and your habits that make macros easy, well, mindful eating is going to come like a breeze.
Hmm. I love that. One question I had written down here for you wanted you to speak on when you did. I'm going to rewind real quick back to 2021, first time you did 75 hard, and first time that you probably consistently tracked
Oh, yeah.
macros.
Definitely the first
Uh,
time.
Talk a little bit about that experience for a little bit of contrast and just the effort that was there behind it and what happened afterwards.
Yeah. So 75 hard 2021 is 100% the first time that I tracked consistently. However, I would say that my system of tracking was not ideal. I was chasing macros all day. I wish I could go look back at my screen time. I probably spent like an hour in MyFitnessPal every single day, which in hindsight is hilarious, but it taught me a lot. However, the second 75 hard ended, I wanted to just be done with it. I was like, oh, I'm so sick of tracking. Like, I finally lost the 30 pounds. Like, I'm going to be done tracking, not realizing that when I would stop tracking, I maintained for a while, like close to a year, I think it was. And then it was pretty easy that the weight started to climb again in 2022. And I was like, afraid to get on the scale again. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? I don't really want to track again, but I definitely feel like I need to go into another deficit phase and I need to start tracking. And I just went through this constant loop and cycle after 75 hard that it was like I tracked so meticulously, like to the gram, like you mentioned on our call tonight. Sometimes I would weigh out 17 grams of cashews and half a scoop of a protein shake. And then I would save all my favorite carbs for the end of the night. I would do a rice
Treats.
cake and
Yeah.
strawberries and Rice Krispie. And it was just my way of like trying to enjoy the process. But at the same time, I learned I was burning myself out a lot in how I tracked food and how I looked at food,
Hmm.
not realizing that I could have made that process so much easier and more systemized and not this constant feeling of chasing food or pleasure.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the corner you paint yourself into is the moment you quit tracking, you don't know how to accurately hit your calories.
Correct. Because I
You
was
don't
grabbing
know
random
if you're
things.
eating too much or not enough because you're grabbing whatever, tracking it, and like, oh, it fits. Cool. Now I just need to go and tweak this. And that only works as long as you're willing to play that game. And I think it also promotes a lot of, I don't want to say unhealthy food choices, but it's very easy to try and fit in all the processed food, the treats, and you get in the habit of not building whole meals, full meals. You were eating, I mean, a couple protein bars a day. You're having protein powder because you were icked by meat. You were having whatever snacks to try and fit, and basically, like we said, Tetris everything together. And the day that you stop doing that, it's like, okay, well, now I have no clue how to actually go and build 3 or 4 meals that are going to help me hit my goals because I haven't done it. I haven't put in the reps. All you did was basically used MyFitnessPal as a crutch, and that's not what it's intended for. Also, really easy to go way under your fiber goal when you're doing stuff like that because it's not displayed on there
Oh,
unless you
yeah.
actually go and look for it or turn it on the settings if you pay for premium and have fiber pop up on the first things. For anybody wondering, here, 10 to 15 grams of fiber per about 1,000 every 1,000 calories. So if you eat 2,000 calories, 20 to 30 grams of fiber. I would shoot for 30. The average person, like exponentially, vastly, what's the word I want? Some amplifier. They significantly undereat on fiber. Most people do. And it is crazy when someone comes in and they start eating fiber and they're like, wow, gosh. And you can't just go straight from 5 grams to 45 grams of fiber. That's not going to sit very well
No.
with people. But people are like, wow, this might be TMI, but I'm starting to have like a bowel movement every morning. And I'm like, gosh, isn't that nice to not have to wait 3 days and wonder if it's going to happen at work or when you're on the road or in a gas station? I mean,
Yeah.
I hate that.
Mhm.
So I'm cranky. If I don't have like, that's not normal, if that's not regular, I'm like, okay, I know that I'm not eating enough fiber. I'm not eating consistently enough here. So,
Yeah. I think you made a good point, though, that it's important to understand how to build those meals, but being able to allow yourself, once you get out of the if it fits your macros game too, like a lot of this comes in stages. I didn't just jump to 30 grams of fiber. I didn't just jump to having perfectly curated meals. Like we just explained, I started at 75 hard. I started with macros. I wish back then I would have started with more structure versus
mhm.
what I did do with macros. I probably could have been exponentially further along if I had known the structure. Instead, I knew what macros were and I just chased them all day until I was burnt out. And so
Hmm.
that's why I think it really amplifies the importance of each stage of this.
Hmm.
It doesn't just come lickety
Also,
split.
too, you and I were at very different stages. Even though I was tracking macros, I still did have very regular meals, much more than you. And so I think for, if there's any couples watching this, husbands, wives, whoever you're living with, if you're in college and have a roommate and you're around people that are kind of doing the same thing, not even your significant other for that matter, people are at different stages. People have different skill sets. People like to eat differently. And so I think having someone who understands where you're at and can help support you in it, if that's an option for you, can be really helpful. Common question we always get is, how do I get so and so on board? Or, oh, well, my husband just likes to eat this way. I'm like, well, that might work for him, and it's definitely not going to work for you. And especially when it comes to eating out, I've spoke very in depth about that when we go out to eat out, and a meal's 1,200 calories. Like that's 80, or depending on what your calories are at that time. When you're eating like 1,500 calories when you're at your leanest, when you go and have an 11 or 1,200 calorie meal, that's like 80% of your day.
Yeah,
For me, when I'm eating 3,500 calories, it's like a third of my day, and so it's no big deal. And so that
that's
can
where
be
you can
very detrimental to people's progress.
and you can get yourself in a pickle when you're mindfully eating and
Mhm,
you take that as, oh, I can do what I want. I have more flexibility. I can go eat out if I want. Like the choices and the structure and how you build your plate still matters.
love it. I think that about wraps it up. Anything else you would like to share on your first experience with a meal plan with macros or mindful eating?
I don't think so necessarily. Just the whole game of I was afraid of macro or I was afraid of meal plans. I had tried some really random ones that I felt like I would get sick of after 2 days. I could never stick to one actually, but I didn't understand what the meal plan purpose was or why I needed it
I,
or
can I interrupt you? I actually have one thing I want to say, because you had worked with a bodybuilding coach way back, like 2016 or 17. This is no knock on them. I just think it's probably more a result of how you perceived it, and you didn't coach with them for very long. It was a couple months or something, right?
probably 3 months.
So when people think the meal plan is the way, or when people think, so for context there, you had a meal plan and you were just following it, and you very quickly kind of got a bad taste about meal plans from that experience, that very short coaching experience that you had. So that's no knock on the coach. They probably don't have time, since you didn't coach or work with them very long, to help you and teach you and learn. They were trying to get the ball rolling,
Totally.
basically.
And I didn't
And
understand. I also didn't have good questions
yep,
to ask
and
either.
not necessarily the willingness to learn or want to learn there. And so I think also with to get into macros here, same thing. You said something on our call tonight, and I remember exactly how you said it.
I think I said MyFitnessPal is not the skill.
Yeah, okay, there it is. Yeah,
It is the tool, and you have to use it as a tool initially, but it can't be what you rely on so
yep,
much. Like I once did. Same thing with the meal plan. I didn't know how to cook things. I didn't ask good questions. It made me afraid of egg whites for a period of
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But you just learn throughout the process and you give yourself grace and it's okay to maybe not like certain foods. You learn as you go. That's the whole point of having a meal plan, learning to adjust with macros, and then eventually feeling comfortable in mindful eating.
Love it. I think that about wraps it up. For anyone else that wants to eliminate the guesswork,
Yeah, if you're stuck guessing, we always say like you don't really need more willpower or more discipline. It's not that you suck at macros or that they don't work for you. You probably just need a different starting point and finding someone that can meet you in the middle. So DM Ryan or myself, 3M, or visit the link in the bio to talk about where you are in this progression, where you're at with macros, if you have a fat loss goal, and if you want to learn how to eventually become a person that can mindfully eat and maintain the body weight and the physique that you want.
yeah,
Come find us.
I love it. We're open books. Just built a new meal planning software. Nerded out on it about 3 weeks ago. If somebody wants a meal plan, I'm always happy to help. So shoot me a message. Maddie and I are both open books. Thanks for watching again. Chat soon.